Hey all, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be about my sketchbook practice and the sketchbooks that I love and what I use my sketchbooks for and all of the products that I kind of use that go along with my sketchbook practice. I just wanted to go through that today and show you one more way that you can kind of release some creative energy, get inspiration, and just play around using a sketchbook. So this is my current sketchbook, and you can tell it, takes a beating. It's kind of looking a little rough these days, but that's kind of the point of it, right? I use my sketchbook just to kind of experiment, play around, play with different colors, play with different mediums, play with different mark making, and really just test things out, and also just for fun. I use mine generally just as a painting sketchbook. I have seen other artists and art journal makers that actually journal inside of their sketchbooks. There's also folks that will journal inside their sketchbook and paint over it. So you want to write down some juicy information that you don't ever want anybody to see, you can do that and then just paint over it. It's a good way to kind of use it as a way to release whatever emotional and creative energy that you can. Other ways that I've used my sketchbook is by doing collage work. I really love to kind of get in and glue paper to pages and kind of play around with that to get different textures and that sort of thing. That is about it. There really isn't a whole lot that goes into my own personal sketchbook practice other than painting. I like to try new tools and I like to experiment, and that's really what I use it for. I don't adhere to any kind of schedule. I know at one point I was trying to kind of create a sketchbook painting every day or every other day, but as soon as that becomes a chore, I let it go. So I might kind of go in waves in how I actually create sketchbook paintings, and most of the time I don't even share them with anyone. I know I share a lot of sketchbook paintings on my Instagram account. I generally don't share even what's in there. A lot of the sketchbook paintings don't turn out great, and I just don't want to share them. But also, that's kind of the point of it. You kind of have to make ugly artwork in order to progress into making good artwork. The entire point is to have fun with it and to use it in whatever way you find useful for you. So let me take you through what I actually use with my sketchbook, not just paints and supplies, but also some of the things that I use to kind of help me along, and you'll see in just a second. Like I showed you before, this is the current sketchbook that I am working in, and I have a couple of these, and some of them, and I have a bunch of others here, different types of paper that are mixed media. Some are watercolor paper, so a little thicker. Most of these are like half full, half finished. Some are completely done. It's really just, that's just kind of the name of the game. Some of the books I just didn't really like. I'm not a big fan of these spiral ones that I think I got from Michael's. One of my favorites that I actually completed recently is one that I actually got from Hobby Lobby. So this is just a watercolor sketchbook. The paper held up really nicely, and I kind of got a whole bunch of paintings in here, and I got to experiment and play around with this one, and it held up really well. The one that I'm currently using, which is the same as this one, is a Strathmore. I believe it's a mixed media, Series 500 mixed media paper is what it says in here. I got this on Amazon. It's a great book. It actually holds up really nicely for being mixed media paper. A lot of times when I've used mixed media paper in the past, it sort of gets a little too wavy and bumpy, and the book just kind of looks crazy. So it actually holds up really, really well. And then these are just other sketchbooks that are more like watercolor paper, hard cover sketchbooks. This one's more of a soft cover, which I kind of like. You can kind of bend it to, wherever you need to. The only thing that I will say about this one is the paint will kind of leak through the center onto other pages. That's probably the only complaint that I have, but that kind of happens in all of them, if I'm going to be completely honest. I tend to use a lot of water with my paintings, so, it happens. Those are all of the books that I've tried, and like I said, Some are full, some aren't. These sketchbooks are really just meant for you to kind of play around with. So if you kind of get sick of messing with one or playing around in a sketchbook, there's no need to keep it if you don't want to. Now, some of these are filled with absolutely horrendous artwork that I'll never show anyone because, you know, that's kind of embarrassing, but it is a great way for you to go back and see how you've evolved over the course of time, and how much better you are as an artist from a few years ago to now. One thing that I wish I would have done that I have not done, and a lot of these is dated, any of it. I have no idea when I created this one or that one, or, you know, I have no idea. So one of the things that I've done to sort of combat some of the leaking that I get in the page folds is I have some of this Yupo paper. Yupo? I think it's Yupo. It's kind of like a plasticky paper. I know that you use it for alcohol inks. I bought some, kind of not knowing what it was, and it's not necessarily something that I use in my abstract painting practice, so I use it just as kind of a splash guard, if you will. So when I'm going in, I will place a piece on the page behind the page that I'm on, and then on the page in front. And sometimes I'll kind of tape it down with a piece of tape. But what that does is gives me like a really good sort of barrier to any of the paint that might kind of leak through. And that's worked out really, really well. Prior to that, I was having a lot of issues with, like, the next painting that I would work on would have kind of a spill or like a stain in the center, which kind of messes up your painting. Another thing that I always keep handy is just like a clip, a binding clip. So you can kind of clip that open if you need to, or sometimes as these books get a little older, I'll pin that center part down so that it kind of spreads the book flat. So those always are kind of with my sketchbook whenever I have it ready to use. Another thing that I have learned in the past is if you don't put some kind of like spacing paper in between your finished paintings, then they will stick together. And when you go back to reminisce, they will rip the pages and ruin all of the paintings that you made. So it's a little hard to reminisce that way. So I cut these pieces of, I don't even know what this paper's called. It's kind of a shiny paper that I use for shipping. Any kind of smooth wax paper might work, or even like a parchment paper if you really wanted to find an affordable solution. You could obviously use like printer paper or anything, but I do recommend that as you paint, you make a little spacer, and each one of these pages kind of has a piece of that paper in between to protect the painting itself. And I just tuck those in the back of my book. Now I try to be mindful of how much water I use in these paintings, so I try not to get too many puddles. I will use a hair dryer to dry the paintings before I close it. I try not to use too many oily products, oil paints, oil sticks. I'll use some oil pastels, but it takes so much time for those to dry, and they tend to kind of bleed through the paper, so it's just not ideal. The types of things that I will use in my sketchbook is acrylic paints, acrylic markers, some oil pastels, some of the chalkier artist pastels, pencils, of course, and pretty much everything that I normally use in a painting, just in a less watery, scaled down version, if that makes sense. So I know this wasn't like a super long, in-depth video all about sketchbooks, but that's pretty much how my sketchbook practice goes. It's not super complicated, and I hope that the video at least kind of inspires you to go out, practice in your own sketchbook, try out some different types of sketchbooks, just kind of get into that sort of constant creative mindset. If you have any additional questions about my practice or any of the supplies that I use, feel free to leave any questions down in the comments, and thank you so much again for watching and coming back to my channel.